I'll get right to the point. My middle son is a senior in college. He's a good kid most of the time, but right now I'm a little cross with him. He just asked me for money to go on a spring break trip to Hawaii with his friends, and I won't lie, it caught me off guard. Like I said, he's a good kid, and I want him to enjoy himself, but something about the way he asked, it didn't sit right with me. His mother has been struggling with her mental health lately. It would have meant the world to her to have him around, but I guess he's more preoccupied with getting wasted on a beach with his frat brothers. And honestly, I can't even say I blame him. I was exactly the same at his age. I see so much of myself in that kid, which is probably why I'm feeling this way. Thinking about it actually took me back to my own college days, to a memory I haven't thought about in years. A memory that, to this day, still sends a chill down my spine. That I went to Wharton, class of '85. Still damn proud of it. It was, and still is, the most prestigious business school in the world, and I took that reputation seriously. I had my fun, sure, but I also worked like hell. It was a different time back then. People were crazy, Wolf of Wall Street crazy. I did my best to avoid getting swept up in that world, but my junior year, I did something impulsive. I was dating a Puerto Rican girl, Maria Muniz. Beautiful, sharp as hell, and full of fire. I think about her from time to time, and I wonder how different my life would have been if I had taken things further with her. That year, instead of going home for spring break like I always did, Maria convinced me to come with her to Puerto Rico to meet her extended family. I'd never been, and I wanted to impress her, so I agreed without hesitation. That I was a nervous wreck. Maria had often joked about how open Puerto Rican families were, and I knew they already knew a lot about me before I even arrived. But my anxiety turned out to be unnecessary. They loved me. Her uncles were loud. Her aunts fed me like I hadn't eaten in years, and her cousins treated me like I was one of them. But the part of the trip I was looking forward to the most was the time I'd get alone with Maria. It was spring break after all. One of our big plans was a hike through El Yunque, the only tropical rainforest in the US National Forest System. We didn't have a car, so Maria's mother dropped us off at the trailhead. Just the two of us, surrounded by endless green. The plan was simple: hike, enjoy the scenery, and sneak a little rum and weed along the way. It was supposed to be perfect. Then we saw the sign. Trail closed. I don't remember why. Flooding, maintenance, something like that. All I remember is how upset Maria was. She was adamant that this was the trail to hike. The others weren't the same. She argued, I resisted, but in the end I gave in. We made sure no one was watching, slipped past the barriers, and started up the trail, laughing like a couple of idiots. At first, it was amazing. The world belonged to us. We hiked past little waterfalls, took in the beauty of the rainforest, and let the alcohol warm us from the inside. Then Maria screamed. She jumped back so suddenly that she almost knocked me over. My buzz vanished in an instant. My heart pounded as I scanned the trail, trying to see what had scared her. Then I saw it. A mongoose. Or at least, what was left of it. Its head was gone, cleanly sliced off. The cut was too precise, too smooth. It was no accident. Someone had done this with a knife. Maria was shaking. I tried to reassure her, but my own mind was spinning. The body hadn't even started to smell yet. Hadn't been there long. Someone had killed it recently. We hurried past it, neither of us speaking. The thrill of the hike was gone, replaced by an awful, sinking feeling. Maria wanted to keep going, but I could see it in her face. She was rattled. I tried to distract her, but her smile was forced. The further we walked, the more I kept thinking, who the hell would do something like that? And why? A mile passed, then another. Maria finally admitted she wasn't feeling well and wanted to turn back. I didn't argue. I was dreading having to pass that spot again, but I told Maria to keep her head down, that I'd guide her past it. We turned the final bend, and the mongoose was gone. At first, I thought maybe we were in the wrong spot, but then I saw it. Hanging from a tree. It was strung up by twine. Its paws were tied together, its lifeless body rotating slowly in the wind. A sickly green liquid dripped from its fur, something that hadn't been there before. I cursed out loud. Maria looked up. She screamed. A gut-wrenching, soul-ripping scream. The kind of scream you don't fake. The kind that only pure terror can produce. I grabbed her wrist. Run! We took off down the trail, sprinting as fast as our legs could carry us. My lungs burned. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I didn't dare stop. And then, a scream rang out behind us. A woman's scream that it was unnatural, piercing, agonized. Maria sobbed, her legs nearly giving out beneath her, but I didn't let go. We kept running, faster than I thought possible, until we saw the trailhead. And someone was standing there. A park worker, arms crossed, clearly pissed. As soon as we slipped past the barricade, he started yelling about how we'd broken the rules. But then he saw Maria, sobbing, shaking, barely able to stand. I told him everything. Every last detail. He took it seriously. He took us to a ranger station. We repeated the story to his supervisor, then again to the police. Maria didn't say a word the whole time. Her mother arrived, took one look at her, and just held her. We left without another word. I never heard anything about it again. Maybe the authorities investigated. Maybe they didn't. I don't know. Maria and I broke up that summer, and we fell out of touch. But that memory, it never left me. And to this day, I still wonder, who was that scream meant for? Or worse, who was it coming from? I consider myself a pretty laid-back guy. I'd say the same about most of my friends. But what happened that night, it still sends a chill down my spine. Spring break was supposed to be just me and my friends, Jackson, Ariel, and Isabel, camping on a secluded beach in Alabama. No crowds, just stars and waves. Perfect getaway. We arrived later than planned. The moment we stepped onto the sand, I noticed the eerie silence. No distant laughter of other campers, no rhythmic clanking of fishing gear, no boats in the distance. Just miles and miles of empty shoreline. It was beautiful, sure, but something about the emptiness felt off. Isabel, who had been here before, assured us that locals sometimes fished overnight. But that night, it was just us, and the vast, consuming darkness rolling in with the tide. The sun dipped below the horizon as Jackson and I wrestled with the tents. My Doberman Bean darted around, kicking up sand, totally in his element. Watching him roll around made us laugh, lightening the mood a bit. Then Ariel pointed at something in the distance. "That car's driven by twice already?" She murmured. I turned to look at an old, rusted SUV coasted slowly along the narrow access road that ran parallel to the dunes. Its headlights flickered slightly, the kind of flicker you'd expect from a vehicle that had seen too many years and too little maintenance. It crept past us, almost as if, watching that, I felt an uncomfortable weight settle in my gut. The four of us exchanged glances, but no one wanted to be the paranoid one. So we shrugged it off and kept setting up. An hour later, we had our campsite ready. A small fire crackled between us as we cracked open drinks. The girls chose seltzers instead of beer, which, of course, Jackson and I had to tease them about. The laughter helped. It made everything feel normal. Then, it happened again, that same SUV, but this time it stopped. The engine cut off. The driver's door creaked open, and a man stepped out. My stomach twisted. Something was wrong. I could barely make out his face in the dim light, but I could tell he was tall, too tall. And the way he walked, there was something unnatural about it. A limp, almost drunken, yet deliberate, like he had made up his mind about something. The girls went rigid. Ariel clutched Isabel's wrist. Jackson and I exchanged a look before standing up. I called Bean to my side. He obeyed instantly. His ears perked, his muscles tense. His usual playfulness had vanished. He sensed it too. We walked toward the man, trying to cut him off before he got too close to the girls. "How's it going, man?" Jackson said, his voice forced and light. The man didn't hesitate. His voice was a slow, slurred growl. "You're on my property." The words slithered out, soaked in alcohol, but there was something else. Something darker. I forced myself to keep my tone calm. "I thought this beach was public land." Silence. Then, in a flash, he pulled out a knife. My heart slammed against my ribs. The metallic glint of the blade caught the firelight, making my breath hitch. Bean's growl started low, deep, and primal. It sent a shiver up my spine. But the man, he didn't flinch. He charged. Before I could even react, Bean lunged. His jaws clamped down on the man's arm, the one holding the knife, and a strangled scream tore through the night. The sound of teeth sinking into flesh made my stomach churn. The man crashed onto the sand, writhing beneath my dog's weight. "No!" I shouted, terrified Bean would get hurt. "Bean, off!" Miraculously, he obeyed. He released the man and bolted back to my side, still growling. His eyes locked onto the guy. The man groaned, clutching his bleeding arm. He scrambled to his feet, stumbling backward. His breath came in short, panicked gasps. Then, without another word, he turned and sprinted back toward his SUV. We stood frozen, watching as he yanked the door open, jumped inside, and sped off down the access road, tires kicking up sand in his wake. My skin prickled with unease. This wasn't over. The girls were already grabbing their stuff, their voices frantic. "We need to go. Now," Isabel said, her hands shaking as she stuffed things into her bag. "We can't just walk to the car," I said, my mind racing. "What if he's waiting for us? What if he could come back with a gun?" Ariel's voice cracked. She was right. I pulled out my phone. "Call the cops. Now." Ariel's fingers fumbled as she dialed. Minutes passed like hours. Every shifting shadow in the dunes made my skin crawl. Every whisper of wind sounded like approaching footsteps. Then, finally, flashing red and blue lights appeared in the distance. Relief flooded through me as we walked toward the parking lot. Bean stayed at my side, his body rigid, still on edge. The officer stepped out of his cruiser, and before I could even speak, his flashlight swept over my car. His expression darkened. "Your tires are slashed," he said. That my stomach dropped. That I rushed to check. Sure enough, 4 deep gashes, 1 in each tire. The realization made my blood run cold. That he had been here, waiting. Had we left earlier, we would have been stranded. The officer unholstered his weapon. "Unlock the car," he ordered. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking as I did. He opened the trunk, flashlight sweeping over the contents. False alarm. Nothing there. Still, the implications hit me like a truck. He had planned this. He had waited in the dark, watching, hoping we'd come alone. The officer helped with my tires, but even as we left, a lingering dread clung to me. That man was out there, waiting for his next victims. That if it weren't for Bean, I don't know if any of us would have made it out alive. Finding a secluded place to hang out is definitely an awesome time, but it obviously comes with its risks. Some risks aren't worth taking. It was spring break 2023. My friend Michelle and I were beyond excited as we booked a trip to Miami for the weekend. Neither of us had ever been there before, and at 22 years old, we were ready for an unforgettable adventure. We found a full house rental in Wynwood, about a 20-minute Uber ride from the beach. We landed late Thursday evening, so we kept things simple, hitting up some nearby bars for drinks and laughs. The next day, we headed to Miami Beach, armed with towels from our rental, soaking in the sun for hours. Throughout the day, multiple guys approached us, attempting to strike up conversations, but we dismissed them without a second thought. But then, he approached. A man with a charming accent, a smooth confidence and striking features. Tall, well-built, and effortlessly handsome. His name was Will. Unlike the others, there was something about him that seemed different. He wasn't overly pushy, just friendly, and when he asked for my number, I hesitated but ultimately gave it to him. As he walked away, I watched, half expecting him to approach other girls, but he didn't. He just strolled off, eyes fixed on his phone. Michelle teased me, her voice laced with playful jealousy. Damn, he didn't even look at me. That evening, after a long beach day, we decided Miami Beach was a bit too much for us. Loud, chaotic, and overwhelming. Instead, we grabbed drinks and snacks from a nearby store and relaxed in the backyard of our rental, music playing on Michelle's speaker. The Miami night air felt perfect, and the buzz from the drinks made everything feel light and carefree. At this point, I decided to text Will, curious to see if he was serious about meeting up. His response came immediately. He and his friend didn't have plans yet, but he suggested the 4 of us go out in Wynwood. Michelle, intrigued, asked if his friend was cute. I rolled my eyes but didn't bother asking. By 8 p.m., Will and his friend, Ken, arrived. Ken, to my surprise, was just as attractive as Will. Tall, stylish, and with a smile that made Michelle visibly swoon. They brought their own drinks and we pre-gamed in the backyard for about an hour. Everything seemed normal. That sense of normalcy carried into the night as we walked to a nearby bar. Drinks flowed easily, and before long, I felt a blur settling in. Michelle had disappeared with Ken, leaving me alone with Will. At one point, I excused myself to use the restroom, and as I walked back, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Will was hovering over my drink. Not casually, not absent-mindedly, deliberately. His body was slightly hunched, his hand near the rim of my glass. I took a few more steps at a different angle to get a clearer view. My breath hitched. He was definitely doing something to my drink. A cold wave of fear sobered me up just enough that I turned on my heel and walked away, my heart pounding against my ribs. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my phone, desperate to find Michelle. But she was gone. I called her over and over. No answer. Then, a text from Will. "Where'd you go?" Panic. I ignored it, instead texting Michelle repeatedly. "Where are you? Where did you go? I think Will tried to drug me. We need to leave. Now." Minutes passed, but they felt like hours. Then, finally, she responded. But instead of the urgency I expected, she texted back casually, "Why do you think that? Maybe he was just on his phone." My breath hitched. Was she seriously defending him? I called her again. No answer. Another text. "Still with Ken. Just text." Frustration and dread twisted in my stomach. I texted back, telling her I had already left and that she needed to meet me at the Airbnb ASAP. She simply replied, "I'll be back soon." I made my way back to the rental alone, anxiety creeping into every step. When I finally got inside, I locked the door and collapsed onto the couch, my head spinning from a mix of alcohol and sheer paranoia. My mind raced. Had I overreacted? Was Will really trying to spike my drink? Or was I just drunk and imagining things? But then, the door handle jiggled. My breath caught in my throat. The electronic keypad beeped, followed by an error sound. Someone was trying to enter the code. My phone buzzed. A text from Michelle's number. "Open the back door. Hurry. He's coming." Pure, unfiltered terror shot through me. My hands shook as I typed back, "Michelle? Answer me." No reply. Instead, another failed keypad attempt echoed through the silence. I rushed to the peephole at the front door, heart hammering so hard I thought it might break my ribs. My stomach dropped. Well, he was hiding to the side of the door, lurking in the shadows. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. My fingers flew across my phone screen as I typed out the only message that mattered. "I'm calling 911. Seconds later, I actually did. My voice trembled as I explained everything to the dispatcher. As I kept my eyes locked on the peephole, Will was gone. Minutes stretched into eternity before the flashing red and blue lights illuminated the street outside at a knock. When I opened the door, the officer's first words were, "Is your friend blonde?" A sickening lump formed in my throat. "Yes," he sighed. "We found her. She was wandering the streets, crying. She said her phone was stolen." I collapsed in relief as a second police car pulled up. Michelle stepped out, disoriented and shaken, tears staining her cheeks. The moment our eyes met, she ran to me, her body trembling as she fell into my arms. Between sobs, she explained, "She never sent those texts. Ken stole her phone. He and Will had likely planned this from the start. When I mentioned calling the police, they must have panicked, tossing her phone into the backyard pool before disappearing into the night." The police took our statements, promising to check surveillance footage from the bar. Days later, they called to confirm that the name Will had given me didn't match the phone records. He was using a stolen phone. We never heard from them again. The realization that these men had nearly succeeded in whatever plan they had made my stomach turn. The what-ifs haunted me. I could have been drugged. I could have been kidnapped. I could have been killed. That was the last time I ever set foot in Miami, and the last time I ever blindly trusted a stranger.